All right, let's get started with a few housekeeping notes for this meeting. To help this meeting run smoothly, please mute your mic whenever it's possible. Please direct your questions to the chat box, and we will monitor chat box and make time to address questions. However, if you prefer to ask a question verbally, please wait until the designated question slides after each section, and then we'll have a chance to ask your question verbally. All right, a few notes about wait times right now. We are currently at about 1 to 2 weeks from the time you submit your application till the solar confirmation letter is issued. Inspections are at 2 to 3 weeks wait time right now, and final documentation review, coming final payment to your customer is about 3 weeks. We will be tracking attendance, and this meeting is required for new contractors who wants to get on the participating contractor list. So please listen up toward the end of the meeting, and we will give you a cue to sign in with your name and your company name in the chat box. And this is how we record that you were present and get you moving along your registration process. Please make sure to have your company name in the chat box. If for any reason you don't have access to chat, feel free to email us at solar@austinenergy.com and let us know that you are present. All right, upcoming meetings. The next administrative meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 21st, and that is mandatory for the new contractors to get on the list. And if you hire new employees that are likely to be processing applications or using the EECP portal to submit applications, we highly recommend they attend the administrative meeting. The next general meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 18th. And all contractors, whether you are trying to get on the list or already on the list, are required to attend our general quarterly meeting. And the next technical training is scheduled for Thursday, May 16th. It is mandatory for new contractors to get on the list and is highly recommended for any new technical staff you may have, whether they are master's electricians or journeymen, and etc. We do recommend those folks to attend the technical training meeting because it's a source of information and code updates, and it's really helpful. Please note that if this is your first meeting that you're attending, then you will be required to attend the administrative training meeting as well. Right, as usual, safety moments. For this safety moment, I'd like to talk about personal protective equipment, or PPE. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is essential for workers in our industry who are exposed to various hazards, such as electrical shocks, burns, and falls. PPE can help prevent injuries and save lives by providing a barrier between the worker and the hazards. However, PPE is not a substitute for safe work practices or engineering controls. Please note that workers must always follow the proper procedures and guidelines for using and maintaining PPEs. And some common example of PPE for electrical workers or solar installers are hard hats, rubber gloves with leather protectors, and safety harness. These items must be selected based on the type and level of risk and must fit properly and comfortably. Workers must also inspect their PPE before each use and replace it when it's damaged or worn out. Wearing PPE correctly and consistently protects workers and their core workers from harms. So please make sure to follow the safety measures and procedures established by the employers and report any unsafe or hazardous situation to your supervisor. All right, announcements. In this meeting, we will talk about inspection pass rate, City of Austin adoption of NEC 2023, and enforcements of NEC TAP rule. All right, I pass the mic to Megan.
Thank you, Nafi. Good morning, everybody. So I am going to look at the inspection updates for today and the inspection pass rates. Overall, 80% pass rate for Q1 FY24, so October to December of last year. So great job there. And just huge kudos to everybody, 89% so far in Q2. I'm hoping that stays, and please continue to utilize pre-con meetings. They're a great way to meet with inspectors on site and make sure that everything looks good ahead of time. But that pass rate looks really good. It's not quite an A yet, so we could be a little better still. But yeah, it's looking good so far. So please keep that up. Inspection attendance, it is required for all final inspections. So please send either a journeyman, wireman, or master electrician to your final inspection. It's not required for roughs or meter checks. However, obviously there's a caveat there that if we don't have access to the equipment, you will need to be there to, help let us in and help facilitate that. For no-shows without 24 hours notification, it is a failed inspection. So keep that in mind as you guys are making those adjustments. If you've got a cancellation, just let us know ahead of time, and we can usually maneuver some things around. Again, please feel free to use those pre-cons if you're struggling to pass inspections. There's checklists, there's lots of guides, obviously, in the Interconnection guide, and you can see that inspection checklist on page 76 to 79 in that guide. And obviously, as Nafi mentioned earlier, please also plan to attend the technical and other contractor administrative general meetings, so you guys are up to speed with what's going on there. Alrighty, next slide, please. For line side tap requirements, so we already kind of talked about this at some other meetings, but just note that effective 11/1/23, City of Austin adopts NEC 2023. So we're now enforcing 230.46. So please keep that in mind, and I'll go ahead and just read it out so everybody's heard it at least once. Effective January 1st, 2023, pressure connectors and devices for splices and taps installed on service conductors shall be marked as suitable for use on the line side of the service equipment or equivalent. So just don't forget ratings there, and to make the proper notes and let us know and let our inspectors know as well, so that you guys are good to go there. All projects with permit applications submitted August 1st and after must comply, so keep that in mind. If you guys are going forward, obviously we'll need to have that. If the connector does not contain the specified marking, inspectors will accept a spec sheet showing its rating. So there you go. Alrighty, thank you, Nafi. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Megan. Hey, Athena, you can take it from here.
All right. So this is our RCA schedule. Right now we're just getting ready to do the RCAs for for March. So the next available one is going to be so the next one will be if you turn in your DGPAs and the contract, you'll go for March 12th of March, and that's going to be your deadline so that we can get everybody ready for council for the April deadline. So here we are here, so that our orange line should be one down. Apologies on that front, but yes, so if you're planning to get your project going through council and it's over 74K per year. So if you're doing a PBI, that's per year. If it's CBI, then it's 74 total. Make sure that you're going to get your stuff in by that March 12th deadline. So if you have any questions, you can send it in the chat or to the Solar at. You can also look in EECP to see where you're at in the process. But yes, if you do not have a DGPA or a contract submitted and it's approved, so make sure that the DGPA is signed by us and everything looks good, contract sign, all good to go, then you'll be able to get that next council date. But yeah, if you have any questions, again, chat or Solar at. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Athena. I pass it to Stu.
Thanks, Navi. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to overview our interconnection process here and show you a few key documents and some of our local requirements, as well as touch on some best practices and step-by-step walkthrough of how to get your project all the way from design to permitting to final installation of meter. So let's get started. So this is 2 pages off of the home page. If you go to the Austin Energy website, austinenergy.com, you can see you just go contractors and then electric services, design and planning. The documents here that are of most relevance is the design criteria and the interconnection guide. Also, you can get a an unfilled out form, DGPA form, which you'll need for all solar projects, regardless of the size. Also, you can browse other electric metering requirements that we have, which is going to be very important as far as procuring the correct meter, because we have an approved list that you'll need to refer to when purchasing a meter for your project. Next slide. So here are some key reference materials that we use. Obviously, the NEC is a big one. We're on the 2023 code cycle, as we mentioned. Article 690 and 705 are sort of our bread and butter as solar professionals. 706 is also of relevance too, which has to do with interconnecting energy storage systems, which we see more and more of these days. Again, the design criteria manual that will tell you, basically that tells you how to build services. So it's guidelines for contractors to build residential and commercial services of all the types that Austin Energy offers, and what exactly is in the purview of the contractor / customer, what they're responsible for, what they're responsible for paying for, and where that scope ends and where Austin Energy's begins. The distribution interconnection guide is what we use to help you guys tie in your systems to the Austin Energy grid. So it's got a breakdown of based on what size system you have. You'll have to go through certain processes, and that is all spelled out clearly in that guide. Inside of that interconnection guide is the quick reference guide that I highly recommend you guys print out. It's just a 3-page document. It's a list of bullet points of things that you could go through one by one and check off as you're walking through your job before you request inspection. So if you have that document in hand and you walk your job and you check one off one by one, you're very likely to succeed in your inspection. There's also the City of Austin Electrical Ordinance, which can be found online, and that just covers basically your responsibilities as a contractor. Essentially, it covers what state law already covers, which is that you need to be a licensed and qualified electrician if you're on site. Your vehicles need to be marked if you're doing electrical work, and many other guidelines that you can find in there. We also have an incentive program, and guidelines for that can be found on the EEC portal. It's also a few links away from that earlier document off of the contractors page on the Austin Energy website. So that basically is just a list of best practices, things that you should be doing anyway. So if you're installing your system using best practices and you meet a few of those requirements, it's likely that your project would qualify for the incentive program. We also use the International Residential Code 2021 to inspect energy storage systems. So there's I think it's literally 1-page section R328 in that document. Spells out a few guidelines for what you need to do if you're installing batteries in a residential 1- and 2-family dwellings. Next slide. So a day in the life of a solar project, or maybe more accurately, a week, hopefully not, or weeks, hopefully not months in the life of a solar project. So your basic steps: design, permitting, pre-work, installation, and inspection. So the design is up to you. Use everybody on your team to come up with the best design for your customer. Try to articulate that very well with them up front. Customer expectations is a huge part of this game. You'll need to work with the City of Austin and their Development Services Department in order to get your project permitted. So you'll need to be a registered contractor and go through the city portal to get that done. Any pre-work that needs to be done. So it's really important that you're aware of the status of your customer service before you start installing solar. It's definitely a pain point when you find out at the end of this process that there's something on the service side that's unrelated to solar that's going to prevent you from getting a solar meter. So be sure that you site assess and you take into account these documents that we have here when you're going to enter tie solar to these services, because we'll get it to in a couple slides, but there are some key factors and why you may need to upgrade or repair services prior to a solar installation. And the inspection, of course, like I said, you can refer to the inspection checklist, which is in the distribution interconnection guide. Our wait list right now is about 2 to 3 weeks to get from the request of inspection to the actual inspection. Also important to note that we as inspectors, we're not going to have the solar meter on us. So what we do is, if the system passes, we will release that meter, and then the customer's got another 5 to 10 business days after that inspection to get their meter set. So there'll be a second truck roll from Austin Energy, and then that meter is set, and then your customer has permission to operate. All right, next slide. So some key differences between us and other places. A solar PV meter is required for all solar installations. This is how the customer gets credited with solar. So if they don't have a meter, there's no way for them to get any credit. Also, no loads on the solar side of the PV meter with exception. So that's slowly evolving over time. There still shouldn't be any conventional loads behind the solar meter, but it is acceptable for you to have energy storage systems behind the solar meter. Our color code is red-black as opposed to black-red like everyone else. So that's in the design criteria, which you can find on page 7. We also require a full-size neutral, at least through the inverter or the inverter aggregate panel. So not 70% as the NEC would allow. And you need to use a number 6 copper-only equipment grounding conductor from your point of interconnection to the main PV system AC disconnect. Supply side taps. So your panel has to have a main breaker. If it doesn't have a main breaker, then you need to install one or upgrade that panel so that one can be accommodated. If you do a supply side tap, regardless of the ampacity of your system, the disconnect enclosure itself needs to be rated 60 amps. So even if you got 20 amp system, you need fuse reducers, that enclosure is still got to be rated for 60 amps. You also need 2 inches of clearance around all meter cans. So be aware of that. And address numbers. We ask that you put 2-inch tall black on white address numbers on the revenue meter can or the PV meter can, depending on which one. Sometimes the revenue meter cans are small and they don't fit. But yeah, black on white, 2 inches high. So no italicized gold on black. That's not going to fly. Surge protectors are required for all solar installations. So this is like whole home surge protectors as required by NEC Article 242. There's been confusion about the difference between a surge protector and a lightning arrestor. So a lightning arrestor is a surge protector, like those Delta ones, you know. And I think it's a good idea that we just use the NEC to enforce that surge protection. So be familiar with that article in the code. Also for the rebate program requirements, if you are going for the rebate, your system does need to meet a 75% total solar resource fraction, which is the industry standard nowadays for how to tell if a system is, or how much shade a system would be expected to get over the year. So if we ask for this at inspection, because we see that there may be some shading issues, you've got 2 weeks or 10 business days to give that to us. Also, your panels need to be at a minimum tilt of 5 degrees. And this is to avoid, well, a lot of times it's to maintain warranty, but also it could be to avoid soiling and things on the panels so that the system produces well over the lifetime of the system. Next slide. What does a good line diagram look like? Here's a pretty good example. So you're going to want to call out all your components, the number of modules, the number of inverters. You're going to call out your wire sizing and your conduit size. It's a good idea to land your conductors in the appropriate side of the meter can too, so that there's no confusion on site. The line side of the solar disconnect should land on the line side of the meter. So basically in this situation, like you're landing the solar on the top, and then your interconnection goes from a breaker or a supply side tap, however you're doing it, to the load side terminals of the meter can. Other than that, so in this particular example, this is a battery project here, and you can see that there's a stamp. So if you've got batteries, we do require that a professional engineer licensed in the state of Texas stamps those battery plans. All right, next slide. So what does a good wall look like? Here's one example. All the meters in disconnects are grouped. There are some exceptions to that, but ideally that's what you should be going for, is everything should be in one spot. It needs to be labeled per NEC. And again, you need 2 inches of clearance around the PV meter and the revenue meter, if that's under your control. If you're doing an upgrade or a repair, just be aware that we do request 2 inches of clearance on all sides of meter cans. All right, next slide. So necessary service repairs. This is really critical, because you can really shoot yourself in the foot if you bypass some of these, install the solar, and then find out at the end that upgrades are required. So from left to right, service conduits, underground service laterals, like that one in that picture right there. Sometimes the ground will settle over years and the service lateral will split. So that's not something that we as inspectors can ignore. You'll need to pull a repair permit to get that fixed before the solar inspection. Otherwise, we'll have to fail the solar inspection, then you'll have to basically go back in the end of the queue and pull a repair permit, and that will add months to your project. So just be aware of that on the front end. NEC working clearances. So 11026 in the code, in the code book requires that you've got basically 30 inches wide, 3 feet deep from your equipment, and 6.5 feet tall. So when you're on a staircase like this, you're not meeting that. All those enclosures there need to be on flat level ground. So oftentimes that's something that a customer has done after the revenue meter was set and inspected. So that's sometimes how you get into trouble. A meter location. So in that third picture there, maybe hard to see, but there is the entire service and the revenue meter is underneath that overhang and that porch, which is against the design criteria. So if that's the case, you need to stop work or don't conduct any work until that gets fixed. That's likely going to require a repair or an upgrade permit and a relocation of that service, or a removal of that overhang and porch to meet the design criteria. Oftentimes, that part of the project can be time-consuming and expensive, so it's good to do it before solar starts. No exterior main disconnect. So this picture on the far right there, you can see that's a old revenue meter that goes directly through the wall, and there isn't a main disconnect on the outside of the house. Contractor missed this, so they've got all their solar installed, but yet they don't have a main disconnect, which is again against design criteria. So that's something that they would have to stop work, pull a repair or an upgrade permit, and get that service up to code before the solar meter can be released. So again, these are things that should be considered prior to installing anything on someone's roof. All right, next slide. So for supply side connections, in our interconnection guide here, you can see there are some rules about how supply side connections or line side taps need to be done. Components in this circuit that need to be there are a main breaker. So if you have an old panel with no main breaker, a supply side tap is not going to fly. If that panel cannot accommodate the main breaker, you will likely have to get an upgrade or repair permit so that you can install a panel that will accommodate one so that you can then do a supplied side tap. But oftentimes, if you're upgrading the panel, you can then do a backfeed breaker. In any case, if you got a supply side tap, you need a main breaker. Some common errors, the solar disconnect is greater than 10 feet from your tap. There's not enough room in the panel, or you don't have a 60 amp rated disconnect enclosure. Next slide. So supply side connections, good and bad. You can see on the left there, we have a good one. You've got a nice open area inside of that panel to tap into those main conductors in a straight run. On the left there, there's just not the room. You've got a side mounted main breaker. That is not a panel that you can have a supply side tap in. That is an upgrade or a repair or a downsize of system so you can do a backfeed breaker. But the picture on the right is not going to fly. And in fact, in this picture too, these piercing taps, these particular devices, I think they're no longer acceptable as of last year, when we started requiring these devices to be listed as suitable for use on the line side. So next slide. So solar panel placement. Where possible, refrain from installing solar panels that exceed the roof plane, as drawn out here in this diagram. So if you do install panels that are above the roof hip or past the valley, we will require an engineered stamped set of drawings. So if your customer is insistent on a certain system size, just be aware that it will require a little more engineering and planning to make that happen. All right, next slide. How to perform a shade analysis. So if you're going for the rebate, you'll have to have a system that's been analyzed for shade and has at least a 75% total solar resource fraction. The name of the game here is that you need to be on site and in person, and taking photographs of where the actual array is installed. You can use software to help you get to the final analysis of this 75% number, but it's important that you input the data properly. So you can always skew your results by not putting data into the system properly. So just be aware that we might, if the inspectors note that there's excessive shade during an inspection and you haven't submitted a report, we would ask for that at inspection, and then you'd have another 2 weeks to provide that to us. Our next slide. So a successful project requires collaboration between your design team and your electrical team. As noted earlier, service upgrade requirements not met. Repair work that needs to get caught at the site assessment. Your connections are not torqued. And for rebated projects, that the system does not meet shading requirements or failure to comply with our local codes and ordinances. If you've got questions about meter location or points of attachment, you can email here our spot and conduit team at aeelectricspots@austinenergy.com. Next slide. So some reminders about design and metering, your breaker sizing. So your main must be equal to or less than the meter socket that is ahead of it. So that's your main or the combination of mains. So if you've got an old can that's 150 amps and you've got a panel that has a 200 amp breaker in it, that's an example of the main rating exceeding the rating of the meter socket. And that's something that will need to be handled under a repair or an upgrade permit before the solar inspection happens. Another example of where you might run afoul of this is you might have a 150 amp can and a 150 amp man breaker. But if you're planning to do a supply side tap that involves energy storage and critical loads, you would have to add whatever the rating of that disconnect is to the existing rating. So it's highly likely that in a situation where you're doing a supply side tap with something other than solar on it, that you would run afoul of this rule, and then all of a sudden you've got the sum total of your mains exceeding the rating of your meter socket. Something to be aware of. Wireways ahead of billing meters. So this is not allowed per design criteria. So if you see section 1.8.5 Basically, we require that that you have if there's any enclosure before the revenue meter, it needs to be a service distribution enclosure. The criteria for which is spelled out in the design manual. Taps, splices, communication wires are not allowed in meter sockets. That's both revenue meters and PV meters. So if you've got communication wire for your system, make sure that you run it separately and outside of the meter socket. And when your work will alter the service, you can contact the distribution and metering team for feedback before you build. All right, next slide. Do we have any questions we can answer right now? You can probably put them in the chat, and if anybody in the team sees them, you can call them out and I'll try to answer.
I see Megan and Chris are helping us with the chat, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat box.
Cool, thanks.
All right, so I don't see any new questions in the chat, so we can keep going and I'll monitor the chat.
I'll cover this one. I don't know if Chalen's around. I think this was Chalen's, but so permits.
I'm here.
Hey, Chalen.
Yeah, I'll get it. Permit, City of Austin Building and Trade Contractor Services. Morning, everybody. General type, building, electrical permit. So any upgrades, you're going to get electrical permit. Repairs, we need an electrical permit. New construction, ground mount solar, shingles, commercial, depending on size, we do need a building permit. Electrical permit for auxiliary power. All of this goes through City of Austin Building and Trade Contractor Services. On your auxiliary permits, remember to schedule those inspections through us, not online. Building and Trade Contractor Services will receive that online, and Marty normally handles that, and he oftentimes does a fail because it wasn't requested properly for the inspection. For your building permits, you do residential plan review or commercial plan review. Gonna need all your documents when that's required. Most likely we're gonna need engineered plans as well. Bridge, you're gonna need to fill out ESPA, get that approved. Make sure that your spot location is approved as well if you're moving it, or if it's in a location similar to the other slide that Stuart went through. Slide. All solar and ESS projects in Austin Energy Territory require an auxiliary power permit from City of Austin, even if outside the city limits, ETJ or other municipality. When you're doing your site assessment and it says AE on that meter can or on the meter itself, you're gonna need an auxiliary permit. There are locations around where there's possible that another jurisdiction may also require a permit. Just double check. Or inspections can't be performed unless there is a permit. When you apply for this permit, use the following language for the permit description field. We do check when we do the inspections to make sure what we're looking at is what was permitted. So your size of your system is important. If the project includes energy storage, we want to know how much energy storage. Also remember, as previously discussed, if it has a battery like that, we're going to need engineer stamp plans as well. If using a supply side tap for interconnection, include that language. Remember the proper taps and information given in the previous slide for a successful pass on that installation as well. Next slide. Not install until you have a permit. Permits sometimes take longer than people expect, understand, but you may not perform electrical work without a permit. We don't do a plan review on our solar and energy storage systems. We will in the field review your plans. If the plans were done to our interconnection guide standards and our criteria, they should be definitely successful. If you had a fail or a partial and there's reinspection fees incurred, they must be paid before requesting a reinspection. Rebated projects, subcontractors may not pull the auxiliary power permit. The system must be contracted and permitted by same participating contractor. Caveat to that, if you are the participating contractor and a subcontractor is performing the work, they must be licensed and registered with the city of Austin and TDLR to be able to perform work. Errors, permit not pulled before commencing electrical work. With the permit not pulled, sometimes you might have a question, and a 100 might really serve you to be successful in your project. If the work already started, permit's not pulled, you're not going to be successful in getting us to look and consult with. So please make sure that you have the permit before starting work. Unpaid fees on permits, that is a common error. Always check before scheduling that inspection. It'll speed things along really well. Service permit still open when solar inspection requested. When there's an upgrade, sometimes there'll only be a partial, so the permit is not closed. Please make sure that that permit got finalized before requesting your inspections. The permit expired. That is a common one due to time frames. Please communicate if your permit is soon to expire. We're here to help, make things difficult. If you're weeks away from your permit expiring and you need an inspection, please communicate that. Let us help you instead of delaying your project even longer. Next slide. DGPA, Distributed Generation Planning Application. 25 kW to 500 kW includes solar and storage projects 25 kW or more. Requires review by Austin Energy Solar Team. Less than that does not require a review. Submit to the GPA review, austinenergy.com for approval prior to applying for permit. 50K requires review by Austin Energy Solar Team. Please also attach the one-line drawing design. 500K requires review by Austin Energy's DGR. And we also need that submitted to the email provided there so that we can do an analysis. your DGPA gets approved, and you attach that to your permit when you get it, when you do your application. On the downtown network, any size requires review by Austin Energy's DER integration team. Same as above. To find out if you're in the downtown network, see Appendix A of the Distribution Interconnection Guide, page 59. We've had a few of those, and it's a lot of steps. Take your time. Everybody's here to help and is willing to give helpful advice on how to be successful on all of these processes. If you take your time and listen and ask when you need to ask, it'll go a lot smoother. And again, if your work didn't start yet, as it shouldn't have until these are all finished, you'll be able to focus more on this process, and it becomes very proficient in time. Next slide. Meter variance. When to request prior to installation. If you cannot place a meter grouped according to the Austin Energy design criteria, if the meter is on the other side of a fence, locations where they're not grouped, simply request a meter variance using the email given right here. It's can save a lot of steps when you get your variance request and it's approved. Please upload that to your permit as well, so that when we are in the field, we can verify that your meter variance has been granted. Requests are not always granted. Let's see. Temporary disconnect. When to request prior to any install. Let's keep our people safe. If you're doing an upgrade, transfer switch, we do need an electrical repair upgrade permit. That's when your temporary disconnect will definitely be needed scheduled. Right here, how to request, the email given, phone number given, choose option 4. This is for non-emergency upgrades and repairs. Provide permit number and scope of work. If registered for Contractor Disconnect Program, follow the instructions on this page and perform the disconnect yourself once you have permission. Add request to disconnect in permit description. Austin Energy Spotter will give permission by noting OK to disconnect on permit. If you are not registered yet, please look into that. It can save you some time. Next slide, please. Need a variance. This is first picture here is clearly showing a fence. Meter on either side. They cannot be viewed together. Definitely need a variance. On the other photo here, you see the gas meter there was preventing the tight grouping of all equipment, and it was placed on the PV meter and disconnect was placed in the far right, 3 feet away from the gas meter. They're both visible. They're within sight. This obviously is not a supply side tap, or that would not be more than 10 feet away. Next slide, please. CT meter. This inspection process is different. If an instrument rated CT meter will be used, contact your distribution metering group to schedule a CT inspection and meter installation when PV system is installed, but before requesting a final solar inspection. If this process is done, there will be a sticker placed by the CT inspector, approving the CT metering equipment and its installation. 99% of the time there will be a meter installed when we arrive for our final solar inspection. That lets us know that the CT meter group has approved it, installed their meter. If that process is not completed, that delays your final as well. Rule of thumb, CT meter required for installations greater than 350 amps or greater, single phase, or 225 amps, three phase. CT meters have windings inside to transfer current from large current to the small current that a meter can read. In this case, there will be a multiplier on the customer's bill. This generally only applies to commercial installations. Also, make sure that you refer to our criteria for what CT meters are approved. Next slide, please. Meters must be accessible 24 hours a day. Grouped within 10 feet. 3 feet of clearance in front of the meter. 2 inches of clearance around Austin Energy meters. Center of meter must be between 30 and 72 inches above grade. Cut seals. If you find a cut seal on site, please report it to AE Revenue Protection at austinenergy.com. If you do not report an illegally cut seal, you may be held responsible. For your staff that's going there to perform the work, if they see a cut seal, please have them report it. As you are the permit holders and the workers on site, if it's not reported, it does look like it was done during your work. Common errors. Meter is upside down. Improper meter can. Not approved type or a different utility. We have a list of approved meter cans in our criteria. Meter is behind lock gate at inspection. That one there is, if there is a lock gate and the meter crew comes out to put in your PV meter, you might not get it. Temporary meter left instead of permanent meter. If you have your own meter in there, that is not permitted. We allow you to turn on the system before inspection. Well, we need it turned on before inspection. If your meter's been in there running for weeks before inspection, that's not permitted. Knocking out your own holes in the meter can. Must use factory KOs. There are many different configurations of those boxes on the cans that are approved with different KOs. Purchase ones that fit your needs. Don't knock your own KO. That will be turned down. Using plastic anchors is not permitted. For anchors, for the fastening is key for the life of your system. Next slide. Meter clearance requirements. Roof or overhang, 6'6". 2-inch minimum clearance around all meters, and a minimum of 30 inches to 72 inches to the center of the meter. 3 feet from the gas meter radius, and that is more important from your gas regulator. 36-inch clearance in front of your equipment, from the face of your equipment back, 36 inches. We don't want anything trip hazards, whereas in the previous slide, the stairs, a porch, things like that, you need to either relocate or make the installation safe by having a flat level 36-inch by 30-inch clearance in front of all your equipment. Next slide, please. break the neutral. The neutral is broken for testing purposes. We can use the neutral to test, and if it's broken, that makes that easy. Neutrals can be broken on isolated bars as shown in the left picture, or with a small Polaris block as shown in the right picture. Slide, please. If existing service is questionable, please request a pre-construction meeting from a solar inspection request form. I don't see this as often as it should be. I think there's many times where we come and there were questionable situations where a 100 could have really assisted in a successful inspection. Dated riser that they're showing on the right, that is too outdated to pass inspection. All of the existing service and the equipment that you install must be to code, must be safe. Safety is key with services. Next slide, please. Roof work, common mistakes. Roof penetrations not properly flashed. Poor wire management. Use of material not outdoor UV rated. Unfastened modules, junction boxes, or conduit. Not all fittings made wrench tight. All metal not bonded back to the service. Photos of roof work may be requested at final inspection. I have many of you have photos of the roof work, which does make the inspection much more pleasant. So we're able to see everything in detail in the stages it was installed. Keeping up with the little things is really what this is. Just double check your work. And that keeps everybody safe, keeps the system lasting, and ensures a final inspection when you need it. Next slide, please.
All right, and Shaylin, we did have one question that I wasn't quite sure how to answer, so I'm just going to pitch it back to the team from Angela Victa. We have a client that wants to replace generator. His home is big, so he needs 8 to 10 batteries. However, the roof design is choppy, so it isn't eligible for the large size system size. Is there a rule around solar to battery ratio? He's aware he won't produce as much kilowatts and knows the battery will mainly be filled from the grid. And I'm not sure if this is for rebated projects or not, but I was curious if there are any risks associated with that. So if you could just share some insight, I'd appreciate it.
I can try to tackle that if you'd like. Basically, no, there's no requirements from our end that there's any ratio that we like or don't like as far as batteries or solar go. You could install just batteries and zero solar if you wanted to. You might run into some issues with functionality from batteries, but that's something that you would need to take up with the manufacturer of those batteries. So it's going to be something that is dictated by the components that you're installing. There's not, the Austin Energy does not have any preference as far as how much solar or how much battery. Really, our limitation is having to do with the information that you submit on the DGPA, you know. So if you cross certain thresholds on that form as far as the total capacity of your battery or your solar, then we may question you and we may have to have a discussion about our infrastructure and whether or not it can handle it. But as far as batteries and solar and the ratio between the two, that's something that that your design team and the manufacturer will be able to answer. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate it. And Angela, feel free to respond or raise your hand if you've still got follow-ups there. And I'll just come clean really quick. I do apologize. Al, I was thinking when you had asked your question about residential rooftop electrical permits about building. And the only reason I'm making that distinction is because you will need a residential aux electrical permit for any solar in Austin Energy territory. However, thank you, CJ, for adding that you will also need an electrical permit for service rebuilds. But my next comment, you will actually need a building permit for commercial or solar shingles. So as Jalen walked us through earlier, just wanted to make that distinction and clarification. So thank you.
All right, I think I'll take this one. ESS stands for Energy Storage System, which we should all know by now. If you're putting it in the garage, you need to follow what the 2021 International Residential Code tells you. Not the entire residential code, just the one-page article, R328, which says that if you are putting ESS in garages, that garage has to be finished and separated from the dwelling unit. So i.e. 5/8 inch thick type X gypsum board, essentially drywall. So if you have an unfinished garage that is not sufficiently separated from the dwelling unit, from the house, then you either have to finish it out or put the batteries outside. So attached garages containing batteries or ESS must have a listed heat alarm or heat detector interconnected with the smoke alarms and dwelling units. So this also comes directly from R328 in the IRC. Quick note on heat alarms versus heat detectors. So a heat detector, they both have to be listed, but a heat detector is something that detects a heat event and then potentially communicates to a different system to alarm the homeowner. A heat alarm is something that stands alone as its own both detector and noisemaker. So those are your two options for installing heat detection or alarms in a garage with batteries. Also, they must be protected using approved barriers if the vehicle is in, or if the batteries are in the vehicle drive path. So this is kind of something we're handling on case-by-case basis. If you have questions, obviously reach out to us before you put them in the garage, and we can sort of pre-con about it and decide if you're going to need some sort of barrier to protect those batteries. Next slide. So here are some commonly required labels that you'll need at inspection. Not all of them, but I picked out these several here because these are by far the most common. The two columns on the left there, that's something straight out of the NEC. So you can find those at supply houses or online somewhere. The two on the right are specific to our jurisdiction. So if it's appropriate, those signs will need to be on the main panel. That top one, this enclosure contains feed-through conductors that may be energized when the disconnect is de-energized. We ask you to put that on panels, like on main panels. If you have spliced conductors that are basically being fed from an existing main panel to a critical loads panel, that's what that label's for. So when you kill the main disconnect, you're still going to have some live circuits in that panel, and you need to warn people in the future that may be the case. So that's the point of that label. Next slide. So ESS locations and placards. Do you need one? The picture on the left there, you can see, if you can, rule of thumb basically, if you can stand there with your cell phone like I did and take that picture and see it all, that's within line of sight. Also 50 feet is the maximum allowed to be considered within line of sight. The picture on the right, you can't see the batteries at all because they're in the garage, so you cannot see them from the main service. So this will require a placard as per 70510 in the 2023 NEC. And this placard's got to be permanent, hard placard too, not just a stick-on label. So it's got to withstand the environment that it's in and last for the duration of the system. So that's that. Next slide. So a little more guidance with installation and interconnection of batteries. The ESS must be UL 9540 listed. So all batteries you're going to install these days will come with that listing. ESS may not be installed anywhere inside of a dwelling unit or habitable area, i.e. bedrooms or closets. If you're installing in AFD territory, please send plans to that email address there, afdhazmat@austintexas.gov, and the fire department will review your plans And that's if you have individual ESS units that are greater than 20 kilowatt hours, which I'm not aware of any on the market nowadays where a single unit is greater than that. Or when the total ESS installation is greater than 80 kilowatt hours. So if you've got 5, 20, 5, 18, I don't know if the math works out, but basically if all of your batteries total more than 80 kilowatt hours, that would be considered a commercial project, which requires its own plan review from AFD. So if you're getting, if you have very large systems, it's possible that the fire department would want to review and sign off on that. ESS projects also, they must have plans reviewed and endorsed by a professional engineer who's licensed in Texas. And we will ask to see that at the inspection and also have that plan set that's stamped uploaded to the permit before we'll close it out and release the meter. And of course, always review manufacturer's instructions because oftentimes the NEC will defer to manufacturer's instructions. So that's often the answer. If you're wondering about what the NEC says about something, the answer is often talk to the manufacturer. Next slide. So ESS loads behind the PV meter. Please indicate with a Y or yes on the solar inspections request form here if you've got a battery located behind the solar meter. And this is really a billing issue. We just need to know that that's the case so that the revenue meter can be equipped to read in both directions. It's also possible that you'll need 2 AE meters for solar installations with batteries behind the PV meter. Your team will want to indicate this on the initial permit request. The essential rule of thumb there is if you want your customer to get credited for their solar, they need to meter all of the solar before it serves any loads or batteries. Well, not batteries, because batteries basically can be just the solar bucket for the day. And if you put energy straight from your solar into your battery, it doesn't necessarily what time of day that battery gets used. It's still credited as a solar kilowatt hour. If as-built design is different from the initial permitted plan set, just please add this total system size during the final inspection request so that we can keep our records straight. As far as billing goes, with multiple meters and batteries online, customer billing can be confusing, so it's great to have that conversation with customers up front. I think it's by far one of our biggest questions after installation is has to do with how customers are being billed and credited. The bottom line is AE customers are billed for 100% of their consumption and credited for 100% of their solar production. So they're still going to remain in the tiered billing system for their consumption, and then they'll be credited for every kilowatt hour that goes through that meter, whether it's a battery kilowatt hour or a solar kilowatt hour. All right, next slide. So this is pretty straightforward. How to request an inspection, austinenergy.com/go/solar inspections. Fill out all the required fields. It's definitely helpful if you fill out the contact information with the person who's either A, going to be on site during the inspection, or B, at least hopefully available to answer the phone on the day of inspection. Once this is submitted, the solar team will receive this data and send notifications via Smartsheet. And please, again, if batteries are located on the solar side of the solar meter, yes, if the solar feeds ESS before being metered. And of course, request the inspection through the ABC portal if Austin Energy is not the service provider. So we don't inspect if it's not our meter. Next slide. Inspection request types. So pre-wire, this is actually a pretty critical one. If you've been contracted to install conduit or wire for the potential of a future solar project, but right now there's no intention on behalf of the customer to install the actual solar. They just want to have a pre-wire and have it be inspected and approved and ready to go for a project that may happen years into the future. It's important that you use that verbiage there, pre-wire, in the descriptor of your permit. So you'd still pull an auxiliary power permit, but in the description put pre-wire so that we know what we're looking at, so that we'll final that permit as a pre-wire. Roughs, pre-cons, final solar inspections, they can be requested as auxiliary electrical permits as well. Correspondence. These are the emails that you and the customer will get. The permit approval, when the inspection was requested, and all those things there. They'll also get a notification when the PV meter is installed, and of course any rebate guideline enrollment updates. Timeline. Continue to use FormStack and Smartsheet while we work out the bugs, and March 2024 is when we expect to roll out the new system. However, we will continue to use FormStack in the interim. Alrighty.
And Stu, I'll just add a note there that we will continue to use FormStack throughout this process. So we hope to release in March 2024. However, we'll use and monitor the FormStack and Smartsheet emails as well. So please continue to go there first. However, we're excited to share this with you, hopefully very, very soon.
Cool.
All right, and if you want to go to the next slide, I think we're good here. All right, and Stu, you're welcome to keep going if you want, or I'll jump in here.
Before installation inspections, roughs and pre-cons. What is a rough inspection? When is it required? If the conduit's not going to be accessible and visible at the time of our final inspection, so like buried or behind walls, you will need to have a rough inspection. Prior to that, timing is obviously critical there. We need to inspect all conduit, whether hidden or not hidden. So if we're not going to be able to see it at inspection final, be sure that you reach out to us and have us take a look at it before walls get buttoned up or trenches get filled. So a pre-construction meeting required on all commercial projects, recommended on residential projects if you're unsure about anything, either A, related to the design of your system or having to do with the existing Austin Energy service itself. So like I said, it's required for commercial, for new contractors and anybody struggling to pass our final inspections. Before requesting any of these, just please have an active auxiliary power permit and finished drawings. So sometimes that's the only thing the only shortcoming might be that you didn't pay the permit fee, and so it's not active. It says pending. So just be sure that it's in active status before you request any inspection. All right, next slide. So again, pre-wire for solar. Required when solar-ready conduit is installed and will be covered up, but scope of work does not include a full solar installation. So if you get hired to just install conduit and wire and walls, that's going to get covered up for an indefinite amount of time before a solar project starts or even doesn't start in the future. You don't want to have to go back and rip open walls or dig up trenches. So you want to have that record in place of a pre-wire being looked at and passed by us, so that you can use those raceways for the future solar project that you may or may not have. So we inspect all pre-wire installations in our territory, residential or commercial. You'll also need to fill out the DGPA and select pre-wire for solar. Again, pre-wire is the key word here. No need to enter capacity information, obviously, because there is no capacity at this point. In the solar inspection request form, select pre-wire for solar as inspection request type, and the inspection pass result will serve as a reference for any future solar projects at that site. Also, if you are installing a solar system, then you do not need a separate pre-wire permit. So if it's all happening under one permit, then a pre-wire is not required. We still may require a rough inspection, but that's part of the larger purview of an entire solar project that will eventually get finalized out. All right, next slide. Inspection notifications within Smartsheet. So how does Smartsheet communications work? You and your customer will receive emails when the inspection is all of those things: requested, postponed, scheduled, passed or failed, and when the PV meter is installed. If your inspection fails, there'll be a list of deficiencies that will be in that confirmation email. So those lists of deficiencies are coming directly from the hands of the inspectors. So I would highly recommend that you avoid the game of telephone with the people in your organization about what needs to be done. If you have questions, please refer directly to that email with the list of deficiencies. If you have a problem or question about those deficiencies, you can reach out directly to your solar inspector. I believe that when you have that email too, you can respond directly to it and it will go to the appropriate inspector. So if you got deficiencies and you got questions, just reply as if you're talking to the inspector and hopefully you'll get an answer. The sender will be Austin Energy Solar Inspections. Oh yeah, or it might have our name via Smartsheet. And please add this email address here, automation@apps.smartsheet.com, as a safe sender to make sure that you don't miss any of these announcements. Also, you can email solarinspections@austinenergy.com with any inspection related questions. And that email address is monitored by several of us. So that's another good way to get your questions answered. If multiple inspections are scheduled / completed for the same contractor at the same time, Smartsheet combines the notifications for all inspections in one email. So scroll to the bottom. If you have 2 inspections on the same day, if you're not careful, it might look like you just have 1. So be sure you go to the bottom if you're expecting 2 inspections. If you requested them on the same day, it's possible that they'll be inspected on the same day. So read the full email. Next slide. And here's what a Smartsheet announcement might look like. You're going to have a date and time. If you don't have a date and time from us for your inspection, then you don't have an inspection. So solar inspections from Austin Energy will have a date and time. If you have some window between 8 and 4, it's probably a city thing. We'll always give you a date and time. How to be a rock star at an inspection. So send the right person. You got to have a qualified electrician on site who is at least a residential wireman. That's the those 3 positions right there are allowed to work on site unsupervised. So it's got to be one of those people. If they're doing any work as part of the inspection to make small corrections, they'll need to be qualified to do that. Come prepared. So bring the wiring diagram, the module layout, any TDLR documentation, and your vehicle needs to have your electrical contractor license number on the vehicle. That's state law and local ordinance. And of course, tools to make corrections. If you can make corrections on site that are minor, it behooves you to have those so that you can do it quickly and get your pass rate up. All right, next slide. So preparing for inspection, what should you do? Again, in the distribution interconnection guide on page 77, there's a 3-page document there that we highly recommend you print out. You can go walk your job with that in hand. Take a pen, check off one by one. You will highly increase your chances of passing your final inspection. So things that you should do before that final inspection: test the system. We have a requirement for a 200 amp meter with a bypass handle, so you don't even need a test meter. You can use that bypass handle in order to test the system. We do ask for system functionality at the final inspection. So we'll look at a plan set and we'll compare inverter, optimizer, device, whatever it is, count as planned, and make sure that that matches what's happening at the time of inspection. Rebated projects, to receive the solar rebate confirmation letter and close installation steps in EECP is something you should do before inspection. And also just a reminder that calling for inspection without being ready is a violation of the city ordinance. Some of the common errors: a non-performing system, poor cable management under the array, you're missing placards or labels, the installed system does not match the design, you've got wire sizing issues, you've got loose wire connections, you've got clearance issues around your meter or the service equipment, meter guidelines not met, Meter guidelines basically is the requirement for an approved meter socket. So, and again, you can find that list of approved meter sockets on the Austin Energy website. You can actually just Google Austin Energy meter sockets, and in my experience, it's the first link that pops up. If you can't find a meter due to supply chain issues, at that same link at the bottom of the page, there's a little informational blurb about how to request a variance. Not variance isn't the right word. How to request the use of an alternate meter can. But these days, hopefully, the supply chain issues are not what they used to be, and you can find an approved can. Next slide. Any questions?
I'll just say I don't see anything new in the chat, so I think we can keep going. Unless anybody has their hand raised or wants to raise their hand right now, feel free. Does Austin Energy will do a pre-inspection before installation? I'm not sure how to answer that.
We can do I mean, I would call that a pre-construction meeting more than a pre-inspection. So as a general rule, we can do a pre-construction meeting if you've got questions, but it's also something that can be abused. So you can't have a pre-construction meeting ahead of every inspection as a way of avoiding failure. But if you got legit questions, we're here to answer them, either on site or via devices, pictures and phones, things like that.
Perfect. Thanks, Stu. And just as a quick note there, commercial does require a pre-con, residential does not require it. So just keep that in mind. Alrighty, and I can take just a couple more here. So helpful links. If you guys have questions, please make sure to, check these links first. Of course, we're always happy to help. So you can reach out to solar@austinenergy.com with any questions about rebates, processing, anything like that. Reach out to solarinspections@austinenergy.com if you have any questions about inspections or anything specifically in the DIG or DCM that you are not sure about that you wanted to kind of touch base on. Feel free to go there. And then also, of course, DGPA review for any DGPA review questions. Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. One thing here, so I think most of you guys are probably aware of this, but of course, City of Austin regulates the permits and your vendor registration. We will come out into the inspection on said permits. So if you have questions, and again, I know Jalen had mentioned this on an earlier slide, feel free to reach out to the building contractor trade services team specific to questions about permitting or moving those forward. There are lots of new links that they've got in terms of how to do that, or if you need to withdraw a permit. We've seen a couple of times where people are submitting inspection requests and they've got 2 aux permits for the exact same scope of work. We will ask you to withdraw one if it's covering the exact same scope, just because we don't need it. We don't want to have additional open permits. And also it saves you guys a little bit of money. That way you're not getting double charged for the same exact inspection. So anyway, just keep that in mind. But City of Austin vendor registration, you can go there. If you have questions again about anything design related, come to us for that. To that point, again, look here for temporary disconnects, service rebuilds, or line side taps. Reach out to St. Elmo. If you need to have a meter seal cut or to report a cut or broken meter seal, reach out to AE Revenue Protection at austinenergy.com. We just went through CDP training last month, so hopefully you guys all caught that. In all honesty, I would have to reach out to see when the next window is, although they may have that updated online. However, you can reach out to AE Disconnect Program for any questions there. If you, need to check the status of a CT meter, obviously, go back one, sorry, if you would. Yep. AE DMO dispatch, I'll let you guys continue to read on meter variances, obviously still go to observe. And then there you go. Solar and solar inspections at. All right, now feel free to move to the next one. Alrighty. And then of course, there's a few more links. Again, we've already kind of gone through these, so I won't go through them, but just keep that in mind. And also if you've got a project that's 500 kW or more, that is going to go to AE DER feasibility at austinenergy.com. And that DER feasibility team is going to do a study on that project to make sure that you guys are the project's feasible. So at any rate, go there for anything over 500 kW. And that is it, I believe. Thank you, Nuffy.
Thanks, Megan.
Yep.
Thank you. Everyone, please make sure to have your name and your company name in the chat box before you leave, especially if you log in as a guest. I cannot see your name or your company name, so please have your name and your company name in the chat box. And stay tuned. Athena is going to give us a presentation about DGPA. So I pass the mic to Athena.
Hey everyone, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And yes, if you have the time, we would love to have you stay and talk to us or listen in on the DGPAs. So if you guys don't know, I'm Athena. I look at the DGPAs and we do some pass or fails. So we've seen a couple of things, and so we'd like to just send out some DGPA instructions and help you all fill out this form. All right, so if you want to stay and chat, here we go. All right, so what is a DGPA? A DGPA, distributed generation planning application, and how are they processed, right? So first, they're used to ensure that the transformer is proper, that the transformer will work for your system. So we're checking out sizes here. So this will be for solar and batteries, but it's not going to be for home backup generators. All grid-tied DG needs to submit a DGPA, and this is part of permitting. So the way that you do it depends on the size of your project. Just a quick note that this is an AC. The DG is not going to be the 0.83 that we do. It's actually just depends on your inverter output. So check out those specs. Big thing to note here, though, is that Austin Energy can't edit these. So this is kind of why we're doing this project, is that if for some reason you didn't like fill a part out or anything like that, Austin Energy can't fill it out for you. And so we have to send it back, and that's the automatic rejection. It totally sucks because we could definitely want to help you out, but it's just a liability on our front. So big thing, we can't edit the form for you. And then also a helpful tip, if you need any questions on permits, check out the permit manual, and that link is there. We'll send these slides out for you too. So I said earlier that we were going to talk about like the path. So the way that you submit your DGPA is if you have a project under 25, then you can just submit it straight to the ABNC portal for your permits. If your project is between 25 and 500, then you would send it to the DGPA review inbox, and the link is there. And then after you get the approved form, then you'll send it to ABNC. So it has to be approved if the project is between 25 and 500. Last step is if your project is over 500, then you've got to submit it to our DER integration team. So they've got a form, the link is right there. You would just fill it out and they would get back to you. After everything is approved, then same deal, send it to ABNC. All right, so for the DGPA, this is what the section 1 looks like. The first part here, you've got a checkbox here. So basically anything under 25, we talked about it, right? Don't need a review. Over will need a review, just depends on what team. This is kind of silly, but the way that I remember the greater than and the less than is by saying the alligator eats the bigger number. So this is what we see pretty commonly. Make sure that you're checking that right box. Again, we can't edit the forms for you. So if you make sure that the checkbox is correct, then we won't have to send it back. Couple things to note is that when Austin Energy is reviewing your project and it's over 50 kW AC, we do require a set of drawings. So make sure to attach that when you're sending it to the review inbox, and that way we don't have to add any more time on the correspondence. All right, so review by the DER team. So again, 500 kW. And if you're doing multiple projects, they're all grouped together and it exceeds 500, then that's also going to go to the DR team. And then anything on the downtown network, DER team. So yeah, those are kind of our buckets, our pathways. And this is section 1. For section 2, a little straightforward. So again, applicant name, signature, all those good things. If it's a new build, the account number doesn't have to be there. We definitely understand. But if it's not a new build, please make sure that you have that there. Also, project address, of course, we need those. So make sure that's not blank. And then for section C, so if you're doing solar or solar plus storage, then we do want you to make sure to click those extra boxes. So if you are doing a RAS project, then there's a little bit of a difference. So you can email the solar inbox for those things. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and skip those projects and just focus on solar and solar plus storage. So again, if you're make sure that you're either doing solar or solar and energy storage or just energy storage, just click the right boxes. And then there is one for pre-wire, but again, Austin Energy does not check out those pre-wires. All right. Section 3, here we get into like the meat and potatoes. So D and E, I will go over in some examples earlier on, but just to note that we do want to have those, it needs to have the total DER inverter capacity. That field needs to be filled out regardless. So let's make sure that that field is filled out. For F and E, you guys have been pretty good, so I won't spend too much time on that. For section H though, for if you are, if it's a CT meter, you can just write CT or the disconnect size. If it's not a CT, just click the, select the main panel disconnect, or yes, or distribution enclosure size. So all pretty good there. Again, it's really just if it's a CT, you can just write CT. It's a lot easier, I hope. And then now we get to section I. For new builds, the meter number can be blank, but if it's not a new build, please make sure you're putting that meter number in there. And then lastly, on section I, if you're requesting a new meter, make sure to have like the meter size and the number of meters in the right spots. Sometimes it's flip-flopped. And again, we're not able to edit these things. So it's kind of obvious that you flip-flopped them. Sometimes we have to send it back. So we know you're not requesting 400 meters, but just keep that in mind. All right, so for D and E, we have some color codes that I hope everyone will help be able to follow. And I'll show some examples in a little bit as well. But if this is a solar only installation, we'll have the green and the red as things that are already existing. So if there's already energy storage or there's already solar on site, you'll put that information in green and red correspondingly. And then if you're having a new installing just solar, that's the blue. And so if you follow those arrows, you'll be able to put them in the right spots. So here's an example of a made up project where you are filling out the DGPA. So for here, we have some existing condition or no existing conditions, right? No solar, no energy storage, but we are installing a new system. So we chose just 100 550 watt modules. And so you'll see the math down there. The divided by 1,000 is just to get to the kilowatts, watts to kilowatts. And then that's going to be what you would put in section D. For section E, you're looking at the inverters. So for this system, there's 2 inverters, 30 kW, you get 60. So we put that in section E. So there, here, if you see my mouse, I'm circling right here. pulling it down, we've got this big red box here. Remember, if this is empty, we're going to have to kick it back. So all you got to do is bring it down and you're good to go. So this is an example for a solar only installation. But what if you have solar plus energy storage? We also have color codes for that. So here again, we're keeping consistent with the red and the green as the anything that's existing. Blue is if you're installing new panels, and then we've got purple here for energy storage. So follow the arrows and you'll be able to know where you put those that information. And so from here, we've got another example. We're keeping consistent using the same example as before for the new system, but we are also adding energy storage. So we're adding 4 new energy storage devices. The 2 things that you're going to look at your spec sheet for: usable energy, real power continuous. So for this example, you've got 10 kWh and 5 real power continuous. Excuse me. The math is down here. And so for the section D, you're going to continue to have what we had before for our new PV system, and then the energy storage, you're looking for the usable energy. If we look at section E, then again, we've got our same thing going with the PV system. Energy storage is going to be 20. So down in our red box here, total DER inverter capacity, you just add those 2 numbers together. So it's 80. Cool. Okay, so that is energy plus storage. Well, now we have just energy storage. So you can, if you're just installing energy storage, then we're going to just look at the purple box. So again, same thing, color coding, red and green are existing. The purple is your new battery. So that's where you're wanting to put that information. And of course, we have our last example, just energy storage. So no new system, no existing system, just 4 energy storage devices. So the math stays the same for this example here. And so you're just going to add the 40 down at the bottom for section D. And for section E, you'll say that it's, again, 20. And since we're not adding anything, it's also 20 in our total DER inverter capacity. All right, so that's all we got here. Any questions on DGPAs? And I'm sorry, I don't, so let me see the chat. All right, we have some systems. Oh, sorry, Megan, are you answering these questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
Yep. But if you wanted to add anything, feel free.
Okay, I'll just read out loud for the group. We have some systems that are requiring an aux permit and DGPA for repairs, existing solar or batteries, but no new solar or batteries. How do we avoid getting kicked back? And then Megan, you answered it beautifully, but I can read it out for the group. Adding existing solar and or existing battery info to the corresponding fields, and no new solar or storage in the new inverter capacity field. So that's exactly right. Megan also helped me do some DGPAs, so we've been in the trenches together. But that's exactly right. Okay, cool. If anyone wants to hop off mute or raise their hand, and then Nafi can unmute them. And I know we're over time, so thank you so much for staying. Cool. Yes. And again, we will send these over, so feel free to distribute with your teams. Thank you again for staying late. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Athena. And everybody, please put your name and your company name, if you have not yet, in the chat box to track your attendance. And thank you so much. We see you in the next meeting.
Thanks all.